Hey, friends! Today we learn about the most powerful tool you will ever own. Not money, not status, not strength, but the way you use your words to move minds, open doors, and build bridges that no one thought possible. Watching her boss lose $1 million deal in real time. Her boss, a senior vice president named Robert, was brilliant. He knew the product inside and out. He had charts, data, testimonials, but he talked over the client. He used jargon that no one understood. He interrupted. He corrected. He tried so hard to sound smart that he ended up sounding like a robot reciting a manual. The client, a woman named Diane, who ran a national retail chain, leaned back in her chair and folded her arms. "Robert, I appreciate the presentation, but I don't feel like you've heard a single thing I said." Robert stammered. "I heard you. You said you need efficiency and cost reduction." "No," Diane said. "I need my team to feel valued. Efficiency is secondary. You just told me that my people don't matter." The room went silent. Nora watched Robert's face turn red. He wanted to argue. He wanted to defend himself, but he had no response because he had not been listening. He had been waiting for his turn to speak. After the meeting, Diane walked out. The deal was dead. Robert blamed everyone except himself. But Nora, a 29-year-old marketing manager, realized something that would change her life. Speaking smart is not about having the right answers. It is about asking the right questions. It is about listening before you speak. It is about making the other person feel seen, heard, and understood. She went home that night and wrote in her journal, "Have been speaking for 29 years. I have never been taught how. Today, I start learning." The first lesson arrives in an elevator. 3 days after the failed meeting, Nora found herself in an elevator with a man she did not recognize. He was older, maybe 60, with gray hair and calm eyes. He was holding a copy of a book about negotiation. Nora glanced at the cover. The man smiled. "You look like someone who wants to learn how to speak smarter." Nora blinked. "How did you know?" "Because you were in that meeting with Robert. I was the consultant in the back of the room. I saw your face when Diane walked out. You weren't angry. You were curious. That's the first sign of someone who wants to learn." The elevator stopped at the ground floor. The man stepped out, then turned back. "My name is Harold. I teach communication psychology. If you want to learn, meet me at the coffee shop across the street tomorrow at 8 o'clock a.m. Come with a question, not an answer." Nora almost said no. She was busy. She had deadlines. She did not have time for a stranger in a coffee shop. But something in Harold's voice, calm, certain, unhurried, made her pause. She said yes, the question that changed her. Nora arrived at the coffee shop at 7:59 a.m. Harold was already there, sitting at a corner table with a cup of black coffee. He did not wave. He did not call her name. He simply looked up and nodded. She sat down. "I have a question. I'm listening." Why did Diane walk out? Robert had the data. He had the solution. He was right. But she walked out anyway. Harold leaned back because Robert was not speaking smart. He was speaking to be right. There's a difference. Speaking to be right is about proving yourself. Speaking smart is about connecting with the other person. Diane did not feel connected. She felt lectured. She felt invisible. And no one buys from someone who makes them feel invisible. So, how do I speak smart? You start by learning the 3 laws of powerful communication. First, listen before you speak. Second, ask before you tell. Third, make the other person the hero of the story, not yourself. Nora wrote the laws on a napkin. She kept that napkin in her wallet for years. The practice begins. Nora started practicing the next day. Her first test was a meeting with a difficult client named Marcus, a man who had a reputation for yelling at vendors. The old Nora would have prepared a long presentation filled with data and arguments. The new Nora prepared questions. She walked into the meeting and sat down. Marcus did not look up from his phone. The old Nora would have been offended. The new Nora waited. She breathed. She labeled her emotion impatience. Then she said, "Marcus, before I share anything, I want to understand what's been frustrating you about our service. Can you tell me?" Marcus looked up. His face was surprised. No one had ever asked him that. He put down his phone. "You want to know what's frustrating me? I'll tell you. Your team never listens. They send me reports I didn't ask for. They call me at 5 p.m. on Fridays. They act like I'm an inconvenience." Nora did not defend herself. She did not explain. She said, "That sounds exhausting. What would a good experience look like for you?" Marcus talked for 20 minutes. Nora listened. She did not interrupt. She did not take notes. She just listened. When he finished, she said, "Thank you for telling me. I cannot fix everything today, but I can promise you 3 changes by the end of the week. No Friday calls, no unsolicited reports, and a weekly check-in on your schedule. Does that work?" Marcus stared at her. "That's it. That's the beginning. The rest we build together." He signed a new contract that afternoon. Nora called Harold to tell him. Harold said, "You didn't speak smart, you listened smart. That's the secret. Listening is the most powerful form of speaking." The cliffhanger for part 2. Nora thought she had mastered the first law, but the second law, ask before you tell, would prove much harder. She had a habit of offering solutions before understanding the problem. She had been praised her whole life for being quick and decisive. But Harold warned her, quick answers are usually wrong answers. Smart speakers ask questions that make the other person think. The test came sooner than expected. Nora's boss, Robert, called her into his office. He was still angry about losing Diane's deal. He wanted Nora to help him write a killer presentation for the next client. Nora felt the old urge to jump in, to offer ideas, to prove her worth, but she paused. She remembered the second law. She asked, "Robert, before we talk about the presentation, can you tell me what you think went wrong with Diane?" Robert's face darkened. He did not want to answer, but Nora waited. She did not fill the silence. She just breathed. Finally, Robert said, "I talked too much. I didn't listen. I made her feel like she didn't matter." Nora did not say, "I told you so." She did not gloat. She said, "That's honest. What would you do differently this time?" Robert thought for a long moment. "I would start by asking the client what they need, not what they say they need, what they actually need. Then let's build the presentation around that question, not around our solution on their problem." Robert nodded. For the first time, he looked at Nora, not as a subordinate, but as an equal. "You've changed," he said. "You used to talk as much as I did. I'm learning to listen." But the real challenge was still ahead. The next client was not a logical business person. She was a woman named Patricia, a founder of a tech startup, and she was famous for firing vendors who could not keep up with her rapid-fire thinking. Nora walked into the meeting knowing that one wrong word could end the relationship. And Patricia's first question was a trap. "Why should I trust your company when everyone else has let me down?" Nora felt the pressure. The old Nora would have listed achievements, testimonials, data. The new Nora paused. She breathed. Then she asked, "Before I answer, can you tell me about the last time someone let you down? What happened?" Patricia's face changed. The armor dropped. She told a story about a vendor who had promised the world and delivered nothing. She talked about the sleepless nights, the lost revenue, the embarrassment in front of her board. She talked for 15 minutes. Nora listened. She did not interrupt. She did not offer solutions. She just listened. When Patricia finished, Nora said, "That sounds awful. I cannot promise that we will never make a mistake, but I can promise that if we make a mistake, we will own it, fix it, and learn from it. Is that enough?" Patricia looked at her for a long moment. "No one has ever said that to me. Everyone promises perfection. You're the first person who promised honesty." She signed the contract. Nora walked out of the meeting feeling like she had climbed a mountain, but Harold had warned her. The third law, make the other person the hero, would be the hardest of all, because it required setting aside her own ego. And Nora's ego was still very much alive. That lesson would come from a place she never expected, a conflict with her own sister, a woman who had not spoken to Nora in 2 years. And the key to unlocking that silence was not a clever phrase or a persuasive argument. It was a single question that Nora had been afraid to ask. That story begins in part 2. Part 2, the question that healed a 2-year silence. The call from her sister came on a Sunday afternoon, and Nora almost didn't answer. The name on the screen was May, and the last time they had spoken, May had called Nora a narcissist who only cared about her career. That was 2 years ago at their mother's funeral, when grief had turned into blame, and blame had turned into a slammed door. Nora had tried to reach out a few times, texts on birthdays, a card at Christmas, but May had not responded. The silence had become a wall. Nora stopped trying, but something had changed. Nora had been learning to speak smart, which meant learning to listen, to ask, to make the other person the hero. And she realized that she had never truly listened to May. She had defended herself. She had explained. She had justified. She had never asked, "What did I do to hurt you?" She answered the phone. "May, I'm glad you called." May's voice was tight. "I need your help. It's about Mom's estate. The lawyer says we have to sign some papers together. I can't do it alone. Can you come to Houston next weekend?" The old Nora would have said yes, but she would have shown up with walls up, ready to defend herself. The new Nora paused. She breathed. Then she said, "I'll come. But May, before we talk about the papers, can we talk about us? I don't want to just sign documents and leave. I want to understand what happened between us." May was silent for a long time. Nora did not feel the silence. She waited. She breathed. Finally, May said, "You really want to know more than anything? Then come Friday, we'll talk. But no business until we do." Nora drove to Houston on Friday after work. The drive was 3 hours, and she spent the time thinking about the 3 laws of powerful communication that Harold had taught her. Listen before you speak. Ask before you tell. Make the other person the hero. She had practiced these laws with clients, with colleagues, even with strangers. But family was different. Family knew your weaknesses. Family had seen you at your worst. Family could push every button you had. She arrived at May's apartment, a small place in a quiet neighborhood. May opened the door. She looked older than Nora remembered, tired, worn, as if the past 2 years had aged her more than the decade before. They did not hug. They stood in the doorway, 2 sisters who had once shared a bedroom, now strangers. "Come in," May said. Nora stepped inside. The apartment was neat, modest. There were photographs on the wall. Their mother, their father, May's children. No photos of Nora. They sat on the couch. The silence was heavy. Nora wanted to fill it with words, explanations, apologies, defenses, but she remembered the first law: listen before you speak. So she said, May, I'm here to listen, to explain, to defend. Just to hear you. Can you tell me what I did? May's eyes filled with tears. You left, Nora. You left after Mom died. You went back to your fancy job in Austin, your fancy apartment, your fancy life, and you left me here to clean up the mess. The medical bills, the funeral arrangements, the house full of stuff that no one wanted. You called a few times, but you didn't ask what I needed. You just talked about yourself, your meetings, your clients, your success. I felt like you didn't matter to me. Like men, she said, not to win arguments, to connect. And I realized that I have been a terrible sister, not because I didn't love you, because I didn't know how to show it. May cried. Nora cried. They sat on the couch, two sisters who had been separated by pride and pain, finally letting the walls down. They talked for hours, not about the estate, not about the papers, but about their mother, their childhood, their dreams. May talked about feeling invisible growing up, the middle child, always overlooked. Nora talked about feeling pressure to succeed, to prove herself, to escape the small town where everyone knew everyone's business. Nora used the second law, ask before you tell. She asked May about her children, her job, her fears. She did not offer advice unless asked. She did not interrupt. She just listened. And she used the third law, make the other person the hero. She said, May, you stayed. You took care of Mom when I was off building my career. You handled the funeral when I was too scared to face it. You are the reason our mother died with dignity. I should have thanked you years ago. Thank you. May's face softened. I never thought of it that way. I thought I was just doing my duty. You were doing more than duty. You were being a daughter, a sister, a hero. They signed the papers the next morning, but the papers weren't the point. The point was the conversation. The point was the healing, the lesson of the silent treatment. Nora drove back to Austin on Sunday evening, her mind full of questions. She had learned that speaking smart was not about clever phrases or persuasive arguments. It was about courage. The courage to ask hard questions, to listen to painful answers, to admit when you were wrong. She had done all of that with May, and the wall between them had crumbled. She called Harold. I did it. I talked to my sister. I used the 3 laws. It worked. Of course. It worked. Harold said, the laws are not tricks. They are respect. When you listen before you speak, you are saying you matter. When you ask before you tell, you are saying your perspective matters. When you make the other person the hero, you are saying your story matters. People will forgive almost anything if they feel respected. What about people who don't want to be respected? What about people who just want to fight? Harold laughed. Those people are rare. Most people who seem to want to fight are actually desperate to be heard. They have been silenced for so long that the only way they know to speak is to scream. Your job is not to scream back. Your job is to listen through the noise, to find the question behind the complaint, to find the pain behind the anger. Nora thought about Robert, her boss. He did not want to fight. He wanted to be right. He wanted to be seen as competent. And the way to reach him was not to argue, but to ask, what would success look like to you? And then help him achieve it. She thought about Marcus, the difficult client. He did not want to yell. He wanted to be heard. He wanted his frustrations acknowledged. And the moment she listened, he stopped yelling. She thought about May. She did not want to punish Nora. She wanted to be seen. She wanted her sacrifice to matter. And the moment Nora thanked her, the anger dissolved. The cliffhanger for part 3. Nora had mastered the 3 laws with clients, with her sister, with her boss. But there was one person she could not seem to reach: herself. She had spent her whole life speaking to others, but she had never learned to speak to herself. She had an inner critic that was louder than any client, any boss, any sibling. The voice that said, "You're not good enough. You're a fraud. You don't deserve your success." Harold had warned her about this. The most important conversation you will ever have is the one you have with yourself. If you cannot speak kindly to yourself, you will never be able to speak kindly to others. The inner critic is just another voice that needs to be listened to. Not obeyed, but heard. Nora tried to practice the 3 laws on herself. She tried to listen to her inner critic without reacting. She tried to ask herself, "What do I need?" instead of, "What's wrong with me?" She tried to make herself the hero of her own story, not the villain. But it was hard. Harder than any client meeting. Harder than any family confrontation. Because the inner critic knew all her weaknesses. It had been with her since childhood. It had been fed by every mistake, every rejection, every moment of doubt. The test came when Nora was offered a promotion. The job was huge. Head of communications for the entire company. It came with a corner office, a 6-figure raise, and a team of 20 people. But it also came with imposter syndrome. The voice in her head said, "You're not ready. You'll fail. Everyone will find out you don't know what you're doing." Her relationship with her sister. She had learned to listen, to ask, to make others the hero. She was ready, not perfect, but ready. She accepted the promotion. The voice did not disappear, but she learned to speak back to it, not with aggression, but with curiosity. "Thank you for trying to protect me. I don't need protection. I need practice." That conversation with herself would be the foundation for everything that came next. Because the next challenge was not a client, not a boss, not a sister. It was a room full of hostile investors who had already decided to say no. And Nora had to convince them to say yes.